Now, about a week ago, I heard one of the more curious Star Wars rumors I'd heard in a while, which is saying something because there are always, almost daily, a lot of interesting rumors floating around. Anyway, this time it was that Robert Downey Jr. was in negotiations to play Grand Admiral Thrawn in the upcoming live action Ahsoka series, and maybe elsewhere too, which had me shaking my head for a couple different reasons. The first of which is that I simply can't see him doing it, especially if he isn't a huge Star Wars fan or would be otherwise willing to take what for him would be a pretty massive pay cut from what he'd normally get paid. Otherwise, his salary alone would be roughly half the show's budget, and sadly, I'm probably not exaggerating too much. And yes, I know a lot of the Marvel actors are doing Disney Plus shows, which was probably in their initial contracts when they signed on to do the movies. And I think there's a realization in Hollywood, or by these actors and or their agents, that these streaming shows are the future. And yeah, I do think we'll see more big names in them as the years go by, but still, I don't know about landing Robert Downey Jr. to play a Star Wars character he's likely never heard of, though who knows, maybe I'm dead wrong. Second of all, here, I just couldn't see him as Thrawn, which is not to say I don't think he has the skill to play the character. He's clearly one of the most talented actors in Hollywood today, just that I don't know that I want someone who plays one of the most iconic characters in modern film history playing such an important Star Wars character. I'm afraid I'd see Iron Man and not Thrawn, because, let's be honest, he is Iron Man. When he says those famous words at the end of the first film, that I am Iron Man, he could just as easily be saying that out of character as Robert Downey Jr. as he was in character as Tony Stark. And look, I'm sure some of you out there would love to see him play Thrawn, and if you do, that's fine. I get the appeal. I'm personally, though, not a fan of big-name actors getting major roles in Star Wars, but to each their own. Lucas also, with a few notable exceptions, liked to cast relative unknowns as well, especially for his leading roles. But really here, there's probably no truth to any of these rumors about Robert Downey Jr. playing Thrawn. As I basically said at the top, with every new day comes a new rumor, and most of the time no source of any type is given, so for all we know, it's just someone who has an idea or a thought or something they would like to see personally, and they put it out there and watch to see who runs with it and who rejects it. Not to mention here, a little after a week of that being the big rumor, we're now hearing another rumor that Lars Mikkelsen will be playing the live-action Thrawn, and he's the actor who did his voice in Rebels. And to me, even though, again, it's just a rumor, it makes a heck of a lot more sense than seeing Robert Downey Jr. playing the role. Also here, I don't think it's impossible that sometimes Lucasfilm actually puts out these rumors, and they use these outlets that are so eager to report on these rumors and to spread them, and that it's all done just to gauge fan reaction before any sort of final decisions are made. Who knows? Other times though, and maybe usually, I think people call something a rumor or a leak when it's just a theory that they have, and oftentimes it's a theory that their audience really wants to be true, because saying something is a rumor, or especially a leak, holds a lot more weight than calling it a theory. Other times still, I think people say something is a rumor that is again a theory, but it's not just a theory, it's a logical deduction when you stop and really think about it. Like the rumor that the Ahsoka series will feature Grand Admiral Thrawn and be about her and Sabine's search for Ezra. Because, I mean, well, yeah, that's probably exactly what the show will be about, or at least the first season or so of the show. You can call it a rumor or a leak if you want to get more attention, but all the pieces fit and are already in place or have been laid out for us. What with the way the show Rebels ended, and we've certainly seen that the Disney Plus shows are more than happy to embrace the animated shows or what happens in them. And then when you factor in, literally, Ahsoka is looking for Thrawn in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. And since Thrawn's the last person to have seen Ezra alive, it makes sense she would seek him out for answers or at least hints and clues about where he might be. Also, Dave Filoni, when asked about when that final scene of Rebels takes place, he said that things in Star Wars don't always happen in a linear order, meaning it could be something that is yet to happen, at least in relation to seeing Ahsoka in The Mandalorian. Furthermore here, when you consider Moff Gideon has now been captured and shown to be, sure, a credible threat, but not so much a monumental one, a new villain is going to be needed, a bigger and badder one. And though, yeah, they could create and introduce a new one altogether, I think it makes much more sense to bring back one who, once upon a time in the expanded universe, was a great threat in this very time period, which is, of course, Thrawn. Plus, though he was slightly watered down in Rebels, we kind of got Thrawn light in that show. I still think most fans who knew the character from the EU enjoyed him in the show for the most part, and fans who had never seen him before also really liked the character as well. So it only makes sense then to bring the character back and give us the full-bodied version in a show not on Disney XD, which is a pure kids network, and a version of the character who is maybe a little upset that he got thwarted by Ezra in Rebels, and has some new type of grand plan in the works, especially if he is the one in charge of the whole Imperial Remnant at this time. Which is likely when you factor in that we were told there is some sort of big crossover event coming between all the Disney Plus shows, or at least the ones set in the post-Return of the Jedi time period, because of course you're going to want a big, formidable threat for that event, and Thrawn certainly fits the bill. Not to mention, again, Ahsoka name drops Thrawn right in The Mandalorian, and when she does, she still calls him Grand Admiral, implying he likely still is the one commanding the Imperial Remnant, as he was in the EU's post-Return of the Jedi time period. And so when you put that all together, I think it becomes very, very obvious what the Ahsoka series will be about, and that Thrawn will be the big threat that connects all these shows. He could very easily be the focus of Rangers of the New Republic, that they are having to deal with the remnants of the Empire, and are losing to Thrawn even though he has a small fleet or a small overall force, as is what basically happens in the original Thrawn Trilogy. I also think, again, using just logical deduction here, with Grogu gone and Din Djarin in possession of the Darksaber, that The Mandalorian, the show I mean, will change focus quite a bit and be about some sort of unification of the Mandalorian people under either Din himself or maybe Bo-Katan if she can earn back the Darksaber, and that they'll rally against the remnants of the Empire, led of course by Thrawn, who maybe still has Mandalore under his heel. And then you also have the Book of Boba Fett in this time period, which could certainly see Boba Fett as the new king of the underworld, uniting with Thrawn or forming some type of deal with him and the remnants of the Empire to work against the New Republic, or maybe trying to shut down the criminal element in the Outer Rim. And in all honesty here, I'd be absolutely stunned if we're not about to get a sort of retelling or reimagining of the Thrawn Trilogy. The only question would then be, would we see any of the original trilogy characters in it, or a big part of it, because they were obviously a big part of the original version of the Thrawn Trilogy. This is even where Luke first meets Mara Jade, one of my favorite EU characters of all time, so would they be willing to go so far with it as to bring her into the new canon this way? And not saying I necessarily love or even like this idea I'm about to present, but could she even somehow be used to explain grumpy Luke in The Last Jedi? I mean, imagine if what Luke saw in Ben's mind that fateful night where he almost struck him down was that in the not too distant past, Ben had somehow and for some reason been responsible for Mara Jade's death and had killed her, and maybe a child of theirs too. Because if there is maybe one thing I could believe would break Luke Skywalker, it'd be something like that. Something like his nephew murdering his wife and child. Not saying that fixes any or all of the other problems with that movie or the sequels in general. There are a lot of them. But I do think, like it or not, we have to be ready for the possibility that they may try to fix the sequels through some of these shows on Disney+. Which, yes, I realize will cause a lot of people to jump ship, and I'm not saying that's what I want to happen, just that it could happen, and it could be mostly done through a Luke Skywalker show that could tie into with the whole Thrawn storyline as well. And of course, I've already seen rumors that this is happening, that we will be getting a Luke Skywalker show in the near future, which one way or another, again, feels more like a logical deduction than anything else, because no matter what they're doing with the future of Star Wars, whether that be keep the sequels and try to fix them, or if it means overwrite them, Luke Skywalker is going to be a big part of it either way. Not to mention, he now has Grogu and is training him, and Grogu is arguably the most popular and beloved original character from the Disney era. They're not just going to let him and all that popularity he's generated and all that money he could still generate be forgotten. Plus, they no doubt saw the reaction to the return of Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian. If they somehow didn't know then, and maybe they didn't considering what they did with him in the sequels, anyway, if they didn't know then just how popular and beloved Luke Skywalker is, then they certainly should know now. And there's no way they don't keep using him either, especially when you can use him and Grogu together now. And so the question this then leads to is, how do you go about using Luke Skywalker more? Do you recast him or keep trying to do some sort of CGI or deep fake version of him? And I think the obvious answer there is you have to recast. I mean, I know some had issues with the way he looked in The Mandalorian. I personally didn't really mind it. It wasn't perfect, but I appreciated the effort to give us Mark Hamill again. But if he is eventually going to have his own show or be featured heavily in one, and it's not animated, which is a possibility that would then allow you to use Hamill's voice, Not to mention if he is going to be a big part of the overall future plans of the franchise, again, to either save the sequels or to overwrite them, well, they're going to need an actual actor to play him, I think. And the obvious choice, or the fan choice, would have to be Sebastian Stan, who plays Winter Soldier in the MCU, even though, to a lesser extent, you run into that same sort of problem I was talking about at the start, of a famous actor that plays another famous role coming into Star Wars and playing a famous character there, and maybe the most famous one of all time, which is Luke Skywalker. Either way, again here, I think all these rumors are just obvious deductions being called rumors or leaks to get attention. Because, of course, Thrawn is going to be the central villain of this time period that The Mandalorian and all these other shows are set in. Of course, Luke Skywalker is going to be used more and be a big part of this going forward. A big part of it along with Grogu, Ahsoka, and many of the others. Because, no offense to anyone, but I think it's pretty obvious that's exactly what they've been setting up for quite a while now. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Do you want to see a sort of retelling of the Thrawn Trilogy or not? And do you think it's clearly what we're about to get anyway? Or tell me how you feel about all these rumors that are always coming out. Do you think they have credible sources, or is it just people making stuff up? Or again, coming to logical conclusions? Whatever it might be you want to talk about, just leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.